Hey everybody, it's Rogan again. It's early in the morning. I'm hanging out in my bedroom. It's so nice to have a bedroom. I didn't for years and years. Didn't have a bed. I don't know, a long time. It's so nice to have a bed. Uh, these videos I've been making recently, you might have noticed that there's just a bare mattress here. I got sheets and blankets, but what happens is if I go to sleep, when I go to sleep, every time I go to sleep, I thrash and kick and toss and turn so much that anything that's on the bed gets balled up in a corner by my feet or just kicked off the bed entirely. So, like, I don't bother to make the bed much. Like, it doesn't bother me not to have it made at this point. I'm used to it. So, so fucking happy to have a mattress. So, uh, I've been watching classic movies here the last few days. Uh, Started on these other lists I made. I had this list from 1980. And then I decided to make a 1990 list, a 2000 list, and one for the silent movies I'd already made, and one each for 1940, 1950, 1960, 1970, all that. 0 years. Beginning of each decade is arbitrary, easy to remember and track. So I started watching essential classics from these years and sometimes a couple of years when it's early and there's less movies, actually. Uh, and one thing I noticed right away, and this has to do with the vitality of the cinema and the culture, and it has to do with books too and comic books, which I've already kind of given up on. Rock and roll. But I'm looking at the movies right now, and I'm watching movies side by side. Like the Internet Movie Database is the main source I'm using. The main movie from 1990, it's widely agreed, is Goodfellas, Martin Scorsese movie. 2000, it's Gladiator. 1980, it's The Shining. 1970, it's MASH. I haven't started watching that again yet. I've seen it before. Pretty good, as I recall. Robert Altman movie. The TV show was spun off from. 1960, it's Psycho. 1950, it's Sunset Boulevard. It's 1551. Actually, in the early 40s, it's Casablanca, which I hadn't seen for a long time. So I started watching all of these except for MASH. Just like I'm being ADHD, switching back and forth between the movies. If you've ever hung out with me in a room, if you've ever lived with me, you know I have this person to person, very annoying habit of breaking movies up into chunks, like picking up a book and putting it down so I can chew on it and mull it over, intermitting the movie. I like watching movies all at once if I can help it. I'll only do it if you make me. So, by you, I mean anyone. Everyone but me watches movies all at once habitually. It's, you know what I find really striking about this exercise and hopping from decade to decade is, but first I noticed that the cinema itself seems alive. That this quality movies used to have generally, collectively, of making me feel less lonely, more connected. When I was a teenager, I'd go to see 3 or 4 movies a week, and that was because that was all I could manage in terms of time and money for tickets. And it was because they made me feel like I was, well, I mean, there's a bunch of reasons. I grew up to be a filmmaker. I got obsessed with movies young. But I started going to see movies all the time by myself, preferably. Like, I'd go with you if you were my friend. I'd really rather go by myself. I was sorry I needed rides to the movies uh, a lot. Um, I did tend to go back with friends. Like if I discovered a cool, interesting movie was could only play for a week in theaters because it was weird and nobody was going to see it, I'd drag somebody else back to see it with me a couple of days later if I could. I did that a lot. I saw movies twice. You you couldn't be sure you were going to have a chance to see a movie again before the video era really kicked into high gear in the mid to late 80s. So, like, I'd make sure I saw movies twice, sometimes three times if I could manage it. Definitely twice. Uh, if there's anyone at all I can think of who would enjoy it, talking to going, I'd drag them out Sunday afternoon, Tuesday evening, whenever I could. But I go by myself a lot. Um, and sometimes I'd go just to whatever was the best thing playing, to get out of the house and go sit in a darkened theater by myself and feel better. Just feel better. I went to the movies for the same reason that most of my life I have taken drugs or gotten drunk. It made me feel better. It wasn't like drugs or drinking. It wasn't that it was a distraction. It was that it focused me on the here and now and myself and my attention and made it uh, pleasant. Like it was no longer nightmarish to just sit there with myself in the world, facing it and me. The the mirror becomes the screen, and then it's okay to stare at it. In recent years, I mean, I can't afford to go to the movies anymore. But if I could, I don't know what I would go see. I mean, I guess maybe there's one or two things every now and then I wouldn't mind seeing in theaters. I kind of dread seeing new movies now because I'm not likely to love them, and that was true. That was true back then. Like I was pretty likely to hate the movies everyone else liked back in the like in the 80s particularly. And the movies I loved seemed like a countercurrent a lot of the time, and were not loved by other people at the time. Now most of those have become beloved classics since then, which is its own story. I don't. I know it did bother me back then. Like, I remember being really disturbed that Legend with Tom Cruise, the Ridley Scott fantasy fiction, Tim Curry. I remember being really disturbed that that flopped. I was 14. And really puzzled when Labyrinth flopped. Like, why? And figuring it out by thinking about it over years. But mainly, I just loved being at the movies, and I don't know that I expected anyone else in specific or as a collective to love any movie I loved. Somewhere people loved it, people made it, probably appreciated it, whatever it was. Uh, I kind of liked being in on the joke when not many people got it. I'm rambling about this because I'm sort of trying to figure out exactly why that changed. I mean, and how it changed. I mean, yeah, the movies aren't the center of the culture anymore, but it seems like the movies did that on purpose. The movies walked away from the steering wheel. I mean, like, yeah, the home video market really fucked it up. Sure. Uh, I mean, nevertheless, in 1990, when Goodfellas was a huge hit, I actually didn't like it the first time I saw it. I'm enjoying it more this time. we all saw it. Like, it does seem like an odd sort of outlier of a movie, like an art film. It's about Italian American gangster culture as a Scorsese picture in a way that makes it its own cultural island. Like Scorsese movies have always been and still are. Um, in 2000, the the movie of the year is Gladiator, Russell Crowe. Um, like, I don't think it's very good, but that's beside the point. It's it's not meaningfully positive in some way. It's hard to describe as a sort of a backstop, a common denominator, bottom, watermark, changing arms, camera. But it's like Casablanca, Psycho, Sunset Boulevard, MASH, and these movies from 1980. I think the next one on that list, I'm working from the top now, is the Blue Lagoon. There is something just doggedly positive about them, and like, I mean, there isn't in some sense. Like, Casablanca is a cynical, pissed off movie that doesn't seem sure the good guys are going to win the war that it's about. The Shining makes you feel like its protagonists didn't all survive. It's certainly true of Psycho. Janet Leigh doesn't even survive the first half of the movie. Hardly anyone who's in Psycho survives, actually. So the characters live through to get introduced off towards the end, but and it's really dark, heavy, negative in a lot of ways. So is Sunset Boulevard. I've actually never seen Sunset Boulevard before, believe it or not. I'm like half an hour in, and it's kind of freaking me out. It's kind of scary, actually. Like, I don't even knowing the ending, which is it's a movie that shows you the end at the beginning. I don't like where it's going. It's dark. I don't like it in the sense of it being dark and heavy and spooky. It's gothic. But I'm psyched to be there. I got a smile on my face watching it. I'm psyched to discuss it with other movie nerds. I definitely feel myself to be part of the collective watching it. Where is that now? Like, it's entirely online. It's not sitting next to me. Like, the culture that we share, you and me, for obvious reasons, is actually the culture of watching YouTubers make YouTubes on the YouTubes. And yeah, that's cool. There's TikTok and Instagram. There's sites I don't engage in yet because I'm still working out what I'm doing with YouTube, as you know, because you watch me do it. And I do feel like you kids are my friends. Thanks for being here. But you're not here. Like, if we get together in the real world, that'll be weird. Like, some of us will at some point. Some of us have already. And yet, we don't. We aren't. And we won't. That's, in some essential sense, it's not us, actually. It's the voices, our presence, our image on the internet. It's not the angry, heartbroken, lonely individual screaming for justice, purpose, inside voicelessly screaming. That is basically what each one of us is now, here, in the moment. I mean, I did notice back in the 90s, geez, 15 minutes? I should shut up soon. I did notice back in the 90s that the cinema had shifted to a place where the sense that movies are a collective audience facing a collective project, and that the movies themselves are taken together as a collective culture, that was changing and shifting towards a place where the interaction with the movie is personal, individual, uh, and it doesn't have to do with a crowd in a theater. The ascendancy of the work of David Lynch actually is a good example of that off the top of my head. Quentin Tarantino, famously after Pulp Fiction, Quentin Tarantino movies basically flop in theaters as far as the metrics are concerned, the numbers, the cash. We see them at home. We saw them at home. We're still watching them at home. And we're watching them by ourselves. Those of us who care to watch a movie 20 times till we got it memorized. I mean, I don't, yeah, there's, sure. We're here, we're there. And yet we're not. We're decentralized. The culture is unmoored and unmanned, and we, the men and women who watch it, we're decentralized. And yeah, I don't have a punchline or a purpose here. It's just some rambling thoughts. All those movies I mentioned that I'm watching, I'm enjoying them. Except for Gladiator. Gladiator is still, like, people loved Gladiator because we wanted to see a good Gladiator movie, and there wasn't one, so we embraced the bad one because it was all we got. I'll talk to you guys soon.